Fuck. All right. Should get started here. It's gonna be awkward for the first time. It's the first time doing this. Hey, beautiful people. My name is Akoma Mikey. We are trying something new today. Like I watch a lot of channels that just sit there and do the makeup. There's a few channels that we watch. I never really see a male do this, and you never really see a male know how to do makeup. And when I watch these channels, they call their audience like sis and girl and all this and that. So I just thought like, what if there was a dude who did this? And I ain't gonna call y'all bro or nothing, but there was a dude who could do this. So I could do it. And I know I love to talk y'all ear off, as y'all can see from the Twitch stream clips. I could talk all day. So this is gonna be kind of a struggle because I don't really know how to stay on topic, but I got my notes here. We go tell a story. I'm gonna do my hair. Y'all could chill out, y'all could watch it, y'all could listen to it, grab some snacks, or just get to work, whatever y'all doing. Today we are doing the Chris Benoit tragedy. Now, if you don't know who Chris Benoit is, he is a professional wrestler born May 21st, 1967, which makes him a Gemini, if that means anything to you. He was born in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, from where he was billed for the bulk of his career. He also had a sister living near Edmonton. According to his father, he was very obsessive. He was totally in love with the idea of becoming a wrestler, started preparing himself by the age of 12. In high school, he won numerous awards in wrestling and bodybuilding. A wrestler named Tom Billington, if you know who that is, and Bret Hart were his inspirations as a kid. Real glossy. You gotta get it real glossy right there. You gotta get it, you know what I'm saying? You gotta get it real. And he attended several wrestler shows where these two performed and slowly became a huge fan. He imitated both the wrestlers while training. Both the wrestlers while training, and even incorporated Bret's finisher move, the sharpshooter, as one of his very own finishing moves when he later started wrestling professionally. Chris Benoit started his professional career in 1985 at the Stampede Wrestling promotion. Due to his ferocious speed inside the ring and physical strength, he earned the nickname Dynamite. His debut match was a tag team match in which he won due to a sunset flip, which is, from what I remember, I'll show a clip of it here, where a sunset flip is not necessarily an easy move to pull off. You need great chemistry with who you're working with, and also a great, athletic ability and, timing and all of that to pull that off. The run at Stampede Wrestling was very successful and earned him enough credibility to earn a spot in a bigger wrestling league. So I believe these are I believe that would count as an indie promotion, which is like super indie. Something you probably won't even catch on TV. Some of his accomplishments in the Stampede Wrestling were winning 4 British Commonwealth titles and 4 international tag team titles. So after 4 years in Stampede Wrestling, he fought in New Japan Pro Wrestling under the name the Pegasus Kid. He earned himself a big name in that company by winning Best of Super Juniors tournament twice and secured a win in the Super J Tournament Cup. Now, me personally, I am a wrestling fan, but not necessarily indie promotions, and I'm not sure if New Japan Pro Wrestling counts as a new promotion, as a indie promotion, but a lot of big stars that you might know have wrestled there, such as Kurt Angle or Jeff Hardy, even at a time Brock Lesnar. And so a lot of people cut their teeth in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Benoit teamed up with, and remember these names, Dean Malenko to win, remember that name. Benoit teamed up with Dean Malenko to win the WCW Tag Team Championship and formed the group The Horsemen. He remained unhappy with the management on WCW, and even after a title win, for which he wasn't officially credited, Benoit made up his mind to leave WCW for good and got signed by the WWF. I forgot to mention that Chris had a wife, previous wife, and they had their son David. Chris met his second wife, Nancy. He was in WCW, and how he met his wife or got with his wife was kind of the most craziest, ironic things ever. At the time in WCW, there was this guy named Kevin Sullivan, and I believe he had booking power. He was a writer for WCW, and he was in this group with his, I'm not sure if they were married, so let's just say they were together. And Kevin Sullivan was actually married to a woman named Nancy Elizabeth Tuffaloni. I hate if I got that name wrong. And a group named the Satanists. Crazy. And he was a writer in WCW at the time, and he wrote a storyline in which Nancy, well, her name, kayfabe, and they explain what non-wrestling fans to which kayfabe is. Kayfabe is when something happens in storyline that can be realistic, such as an injury, a breakup, anything. Kayfabe, Nancy was cheating on Kevin with Chris Benoit, and this actually turns out happening in real life. So Kevin booked his own wife's affair. Chris was actually begged to stay in WCW. He was offered a championship win, and he actually got the championship win. But even despite this, he knew, like, I gotta go. This was the time where Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, just to name the main three, were just going crazy. They had all this booking power, and, they were all these twists and turns and everything. So Chris Benoit, being the student of the game that he was, knew he had to get out of there. And also another mistake that I made was ignoring his run in ECW, where he was also very successful, earning the name Crippler Benoit, which, again, another name was just like, what the fuck was going on? He wrestled in ECW for a while, in WCW, and it was time to go to the biggest dog, the biggest name, eventually, WWE. He debuted in WWE with a group named The Radicals, and remember these names, Eddie Guerrero, which is like maybe the greatest Hispanic wrestler of all time, Saturn Malenko, Dean Malenko, the guy he won the tag team championships with in WCW. And eventually he started having singles success in a triple threat match against Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho. Benoit scored his first title victory, the Intercontinental Championship, at WrestleMania in 2000. The Radicals soon broke up early in that year, soon after in that year. And over the years, he would win. He was a great wrestler. If I was thinking about this all day, like, who would he compare to if he was in a different sport? And I honestly believe that if you had to compare him to somebody right now, you could easily compare him to, he was like the Aaron Rodgers of wrestling. He figured it out. He was so disciplined at it. He was super great. Like, if he messed up, people would catch him just practicing over and over again. There was a story with Chris Jericho, the man he had his first singles rivalry with, that he missed a drop kick, I believe. And Chris Jericho, was like, hey, what's up, man? Caught him after the match, and he was just doing squats over and over and over again. And simply because he messed up a single spot in a wrestling match. So again, over the years, he would win some tag team belts, mid-card belts such as the United States Championship. He had the skill, he had the talent to hang with anybody in a match. But in wrestling, you also need that personality. You need that charisma, the character to do, to break the glass ceiling, or in wrestling's case, the often termed brass ring. When he finally grabbed the brass ring was in 2004, when he would win the Royal Rumble. Now, if you don't know what the Royal Rumble is, like, imagine the NBA All-Star game, but the winner gets a chance to automatically go to the NBA Finals. In the Royal Rumble, 30 men enter the ring, and if you're eliminated and thrown over the top rope, you're out. But if you're the last man standing, or last woman standing, because women have their own Royal Rumble match since 2018 now. You get to choose a world champion you want to face most years. Some years there's just one world champion. You get to choose which world champion you want to face, and you headline WrestleMania most of the time. Most of the time you'll get to main event. You'll be the last match. And Chris Benoit won that. He chose Triple H. At this time, Triple H was, if you don't know who Triple H is, long story short, he is a great talent who ended up marrying into the McMahon family. The McMahon family, of course, owned the WWE, the biggest wrestling company at the time and even today. He married Stephanie McMahon, and you know, I guess he got to politic his ways into a lot of success. So at WrestleMania, it was a triple threat match between Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chris Benoit. I can't speak for that time because I was 3 years old at the time. Not a lot of people were thinking that Chris Benoit were gonna win. You got Shawn Michaels, who was maybe the greatest of all time. At the event, you have Eddie Guerrero. Now, Eddie Guerrero, I have to bring this point home so much because it means so much in the future of, this story. Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit were like the greatest of friends. Everybody loved Eddie. Eddie dealt with some personal issues, and Eddie eventually found God. He would try to help Chris Benoit find God. And I believe before that, they had a great relationship, but to prove how much that Chris Benoit loved Eddie, when Eddie gave Chris Benoit a Bible, Chris Benoit would carry it everywhere. Not even believing in what the Bible held in it, he would carry it anywhere because he loved Eddie so much. Similar to Chris Benoit, Eddie wasn't necessarily supposed to be at the top of the mountain, but they were. And after Eddie won his match at WrestleMania, which is the biggest event of the year, Chris Benoit won the main event. So the first person to come out and celebrate with Chris Benoit when he won was Eddie. And they just both had the main belts in the wrestling company. And to hammer home that they actually believed so much in Chris Benoit, he held the title throughout the summer and wouldn't lose it until SummerSlam, which is in August. So he held it for 5 months because that year WrestleMania was in March. So for 5 months he held the title, which is a great reign. That is nothing to sneeze at. He lost it to an up-and-coming Randy Orton. I'm sure a lot of you know who Randy Orton is. And this was Randy Orton's first title win. He was becoming a good guy, and he was actually teamed up with Triple H at the time. And he was breaking away. He was becoming a good guy. He became the youngest world champion at that time. Time goes by, Chris Benoit still a prominent figure in wrestling and WWE. Unfortunately, after that, after about a year or so goes by, Eddie Guerrero would pass away. On November 13th, 2005, Eddie Guerrero was found dead in his hotel room. Following night, Monday Night Raw, WWE's biggest show, held a Guerrero tribute show. And personally, I've watched the show, and it was very hard to watch. Every wrestler had this black armband and that said EG on it, and it was, as a child you don't really understand what's going on. You don't it's just Eddie Guerrero. He's a character. It's sad that he passed away, but you got grown men breaking down. I won't say that this was in 2005 was the most toxic time, but it was very toxic. It was they had wrestlers court where if you made a slight mistake, such as sitting in someone's seat, you get punished by everyone. You got to buy beers for everyone, or you have to pay for other people's travel and all this and that. It was so toxic. As Undertaker said at this time, I guess men were men, I guess. And you see these grown men, these toxic ass grown men crying over this guy who meant so much. And now older, I understand why. They would have these interviews. They would have these men do interviews, showing talking about how much Eddie meant to them. And when Chris Benoit did his, he was very emotional, eventually breaking down on camera. The same week on SmackDown, taped on the same night as Monday Night Raw. They don't usually do that. I don't know why. Benoit defeated Triple H in a tribute match to Guerrero, which again, that's big because Triple H was super, never really lost around that time. Following the contest, Benoit, Triple H, and Dean Malenko all assembled in the ring and pointed to the sky and saluted Guerrero. Being that Eddie was such a great friend to Chris, Benoit took the death very, very, hard. Fell into a deep depression that fractured his home life until he started writing a diary that was suggested by his wife, Nancy, and her sister, Sandra. But this unfortunately took, it had its causes, it had its positive results, and it had its negative, because it's good for him to express himself other than crying, because I believe Vicky Guerrero, the wife of Eddie, said it was she had them over the house the day after he died, and she lost them in the house, and she went to her room, and Chris was on Eddie's side of the bed just crying. And she also said that it was hard for the kids to sleep because Eddie was in was in Eddie's workout room just crying, and just done. He was out of it. So back to the diary. When they gave him a diary, all he would do in it was just write Eddie. He would just write Eddie about his dreams, how everything was going, about Thanksgiving dinners specifically, and holidays and stuff like that. And it's healthy, and everybody grieves in their own ways, but you could see that he was not letting his man go at all. And it was also therapeutic, so that was kind of good for him, but it didn't, as you will see later, that it wasn't the best thing. After Eddie passed, his nephew Chavo Guerrero, who was also a wrestler at the time, grew closer to Benoit and began riding on the roads with him with a referee named Scott Armstrong. A lot of wrestling fans will know who that is. That might ring a bell to them. After Eddie's passing in November 2005, in February of 2006, the WWE would I'm so sorry, I never mentioned how Eddie passed away. But Eddie passed away of a heart attack due to steroids. In 2006, WWE passed a wellness policy, but although some wrestlers liked the policy, the wife of Chris Benoit did not. Nancy did not believe in this wellness policy at all. She was quoted saying that we both know that wellness program is a joke, and she actually wanted Chris to stop wrestling. She knew that it was unhealthy, as I will get into, how unhealthy it was in the aftermath of it. June 23rd, 2007, Chavo Guerrero, the nephew of Eddie, received some odd texts from Chris. Around 5 a.m. that morning, his phone lit up with a message saying, "The dogs are in the yard and the back door is open." Then another one buzzed with Benoit's home address. The previous night, Chris had phoned Chavo, said he wouldn't be able to make it to a house show. A house show is a non-televised event where, it's just a show for the crowd due to Nancy and Daniel having bad food poisoning. Chavo has said something seemed off about Benoit's later text, and it was weird to Chavo that the exact same messages flooded in from Nancy's phone too. WWE had called the local office to ask if someone could check the house. due to him missing those times, missing, those work dates. They were worried that Chris hadn't shown up to the Vengeance pay-per-view or spoken to friends for a few days. When Alden and his team got to the house, a neighbor told them that she fed the dogs when the Benoits were away. If you click off, I'll lead into the non-triggering parts in the description below. So click on those if you have like a weak stomach or something like that. But ran out of the house screaming that Daniel was dead. Now Daniel is the son that Nancy and Chris had. Now Daniel was the 7-year-old son of Nancy and Chris. Now when officers from Fayette County, Georgia, believed they were running into a routine wellness call when they approached the Benoit household on the 24th of June 2007. It was Sunday afternoon, and the sheriff, Larry Alden, figured he'd find Benoit drunk, ill, or something nondescript. Alden knew that something was up. As soon as he entered the house, he could smell death, and I don't even want to imagine what death smells like. So I'll take his word for it. And eventually he found Daniel face down on his pillow upstairs. There was an unused knife sitting underneath the bed, which some of the doctors believe was planted by Benoit. An officer asked if they should perform CPR, but Alden said there was no point. The child was dead, which fucking sucks. To see a child just face down, I couldn't imagine. On Friday, June 22nd, 2007, Chris Benoit killed his wife Nancy in an upstairs bathroom. Her limbs were bound and her body was wrapped in a towel. A copy of the Bible was left by her body. Injuries indicated that Benoit had pressed a knee into her back while pulling on a cord around her neck, causing strangulation. Officials said that there was no signs of immediate struggle. Toxicologists found alcohol in her body but were unable to determine whether it had been present before death or was a how do you say that? Decomposition? Decomposition. Okay, before death was a decomposition product. I still hope I'm saying that right. Decomposition also made it difficult to estimate pre-death levels of hydrocodone and alprazolam. What the fuck? Found in therapeutic levels in her body. In any case, her medical examiner saw no evidence that she was sedated as her son had been when he was killed. So yes, little Daniel was sedated at the time of his killing. Daniel Christopher Benoit, born February 25th, 2000, passed away June 23rd, 2007. He was Chris's third child and second son, having an older paternal half-sibling named David, born 1993, and Megan, born 1997. I've never actually heard of his daughter, so I guess I gotta look on that on my own time. I've never heard of his daughter. Via Chris's first wife, Martina, who were all living in Canada at the time of the second murder, at the time of the murder-suicide, He was Nancy's only child, as she had no children with her ex-husbands, Jim Dawes, hope I'm saying that right, and Kevin Sullivan. So she was married 3 times. Daniel was suffocated and killed in his bedroom, and a copy of the Bible was left by his body. Daniel had internal injuries to the throat area, showing no bruises. Daniel's exact time of death is unknown. The reports determined Daniel was sedated with Xanax and likely unconscious when he was killed. Daniel's body had also just started to show signs of decomposition, but was not far along as his mother's body. It was later alleged that Daniels had Fragile X syndrome, and that this was the cause of the cosmetic problems in the Benoit family. It was also suggested that the needle marks on Daniel's arms were the result of growth hormone given to him because Benoit and his family considered him undersized due to Fragile X. Benoit's co-worker and best friend wrestler Chris Jericho stated that from his own research on the condition that the symptoms fit Daniel to a T. all across the board. Concerning those who had publicly stated that they had no knowledge of Daniel having a condition, Jericho said if Chris had decided that he wanted to keep it to himself, you wouldn't have been able to pry that out of him with anything. Despite Chris Jericho's initial statements regarding Daniel, he later stated in his 2011 book, Undisputed, it turned out Daniel didn't have Fragile X, but at the time, it made sense because I was grasping at straws. Daniel had some kind of disease that alters body growth, and it is a fucking hair top broke. It is alleged that his father, Chris Benoit, was giving him drugs, like growth hormones. So after the murders at about 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, June 23rd, 2007, fellow wrestler and close friend Chavo Guerrero received a voice message from Benoit's phone stating that both Nancy and Daniel had food poisoning, as mentioned before. Guerrero called back and found that Benoit sounded tired and groggy as he confirmed everything that he had said in the voice message. Guerrero, who was confirmed about Benoit's tone and demeanor, called back 12 minutes later. Benoit did not answer the call. Guerrero left a message asking Benoit to call back. At 3:44 p.m. Eastern, I don't know what EDT means, Benoit called Guerrero back stating that he had not answered the call because he was on the phone with Delta Airlines changing his flight. Benoit stated that he had a stressful day due to Nancy and Daniel being sick from food poisoning, which is fucking sick because at that time they're dead. He's on the phone with them and they're just dead. And he killed them. Benoit ended the conversation by saying, Chavo, I love you. During a 2014 appearance on Chris Jericho's Talk is Jericho podcast, Guerrero said Benoit sounded off when he talked to him, especially when he said, I love you. Another co-worker who often traveled with Benoit called him from outside the Houston airport. Benoit answered and told the co-worker that Nancy was vomiting blood and that Daniel was also vomiting. Benoit failed to show up for the house show in Beaumont and left a voicemail on Chavo Guerrero's cell phone that he would not be on the flight that would arrive in Houston at 8 a.m. Central CDT. On the following Sunday morning, during this time, Benoit also called and left a voicemail for an unknown friend. On Sunday, June 24th, 2007, 5 text messages were sent to co-workers between 3:51 and 3:58 a.m. using Chris and Nancy's cell phones. 4 of them were the Benoit's addresses. The 5th said that the family dogs were in this enclosed pool area and also noted that a garage side door had been left open. Guerrero and referee Scott Armstrong were 2 of the recipients of these text messages. Guerrero was woken up by the text and went back to sleep, telling himself that he was picking up Benoit at the Houston airport in a few hours. Benoit failed to show for the Houston airport on the flight that arrived at 8 a.m. Benoit failed to show at the Houston airport on the flight that arrived at 8 a.m. Late Sunday morning, Benoit called WWE's talent relations office stating that his son was vomiting and that he and Nancy were at the hospital with him. He also stated that he would be taking a later flight into Houston where he was scheduled to face CM Punk for the vacant ECW championship at Vengeance Night of Champions. Benoit failed to appear for the Vengeance Night of Champions pay-per-view event in Houston on the night of Sunday, June 24th. Chris Benoit, according to the district attorney Baylor and the city sheriff, by hanging. Benoit used a weight machine cord to hang himself by creating a noose from the end of a cord on a pull-down machine from which the bar had been removed. Benoit released the weights, causing his strangulation. So if he got strangled, I'm sure he felt some pain there. So yeah, you could kind of see the mind state in which this man was in. 2016 Talk is Jericho podcast, Nancy's sister Sandra Toffaloni clarified some details further. She said that over the weekend, the search history on Benoit's computer showed that he had researched the quickest and easiest way to break a neck. He had then later used a towel around his neck, attached the handle to the machine, which he pulled down using a very heavy weight and let go, breaking his neck instantly. So maybe he didn't feel any pain, but I guess his intentions were to, because he was strangled. I don't think you could be strangled in a split second, you know? Maybe so. I think so, maybe. Because even when you hang yourself, you you see people fighting for their lives for a quick second. So on Monday, June 25th, 2007, WWE wrestlers and senior officials arrived in Corpus Christi for WWE Monday Night Raw, which was to take place on that Monday night at the American Bank Center. And to give some background on this episode, which is like makes this shit so fucking crazy. And if I'm wrong, I want somebody to correct me on this. But the week prior, they entered a storyline where Vince McMahon, the owner of the company, kayfabe, died. He like entered a limo which exploded, and the next week was supposed to be like a Vince McMahon tribute show, but it was canceled due to the fact that a real life tragedy happened. A wrestler actually passed away, which was Chris Benoit, and it just boggles my mind like where that would have went. I heard that Vince McMahon's brother, which I didn't even know he had a brother, was supposed to come in and take over the company or something like that, and then he would just return from death. Vince McMahon, everybody. That Monday Night Raw was supposed to take place Monday night at the American Bank Center as the early hours of the afternoon progressed and the show got closer to start, and WWE senior officials were increasingly concerned that they had not heard from Chris Benoit in over 24 hours. Chavo Guerrero then showed WWE Vice President of Talent Relations, Johnny Laurinaitis, aka Johnny Ace, the text that he and Scott Armstrong had received from Chris and Nancy's cell phones in the early hours of Sunday. As more time progressed, without contact from Chris Benoit, WWE called the Fayetteville, Georgia police for a welfare check, as I mentioned earlier, and in that's where they discovered the bodies at 4:15 p.m. that day. They informed WWE that they had discovered the bodies of Chris, Nancy, and Daniel, and the house was now ruled a major crime scene. A suicide was not discovered during the initial investigation, but one was later discovered in a Bible that had been among the Benoit's possessions that was sent to his first wife, Martina Benoit, and their 2 children in Canada. Benoit's father, Michael Benoit, stated that he had left a handwritten notation in there saying, "I'm preparing to leave this earth." WWE canceled the scheduled 3-hour-long Raw show on June 25th and replaced the broadcast with a 3-hour tribute to the life and career of Chris Benoit, similar to how they did Eddie Guerrero to his sudden death. Featuring past matches, segments from the Hard Knocks, the Chris Benoit Story DVD, and comments from wrestlers and announcers. Again, similar to how Chris Benoit and other wrestlers did for Eddie Guerrero about 2 years earlier. So after the tribute show, I believe WWE at the time had a show called ECW, which would come on Tuesdays, the night after. And before this show, which I believe was supposed to be another Benoit tribute show because he wrestled for ECW when it was his own ECW independent company. Before the show started, a message from Vince McMahon was shown, and I believe I could show it here. If it's not there, it's because it got copyrighted. It's him basically saying that Chris Benoit will no longer be mentioned or acknowledged in WWE. I don't think a lot of people took this as in history, because from Monday, whatever day that it was they did the tribute show, since June 25th, 2007, Chris Benoit has not been acknowledged or his name has not been said since then. Let's say it is 2022 right now. Chris Benoit hasn't been mentioned in 15 years. He's been erased from the face of, you cannot find him anywhere. You have to dig for him. WWE started their own network similar to Disney Plus. They actually became, they was there before Disney Plus. I believe they made the streaming platforms popular, and you could just go through WWE Network and find any match, event, pay-per-view, interview, anything that WWE has recorded. You can most likely find it there. You can find a Chris Benoit match, but you can't look up Chris Benoit. You have to look up that event that he wrestled at. Let's say he was on the poster. The poster will just be, I'm spitting. The poster would just be replaced with the logo of the show, or and like I mentioned earlier, Randy Orton was the youngest world champion at that time. He set that record, but they don't necessarily acknowledge that much because of who he beat. There are only a few people to win the Royal Rumble from the #1 spot, and I believe off the top of my head I can only name two: Shawn Michaels and Chris Benoit. But they don't mention that. They will say only a few people have won from one spot, da 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 da. Shawn Michaels, to name a few, and they will just not name Chris Benoit. To which a lot of people, it's become a running joke, unfortunately, in the WWE or just the wrestling community online. It's understandable why. But when you think about the dark side of erasing Chris Benoit from history, it gets sad. It gets sad because his son that he had in a previous marriage to Martina, I believe, David Benoit, he is a spitting image. I'll show an image here of David Benoit. He is a spitting image of his father. And he's been invited backstage to WWE, but he won't be acknowledged. He won't be shown on TV, nothing, because of who his father was. Nancy was a former wrestler in WCW, and WWE bought WCW, so they own all their content, but they won't be mentioned. And they've been essentially blackballed from the wrestling just industry because of what their father did, and it's so unfortunate. Sandra, the sister of Nancy, said that WWE has not even, they didn't, contact them. Only one person from the WWE contacted them, and that was Chavo. Nobody went to the funeral except Jim Ross, in which Sandra felt like it was a pity or just for publicity to say that, Jim Ross went. Jim Ross, he's the greatest maybe commentator of all time. They sent him there. And Sandra, and I'll give her the benefit of the doubt, Sandra believes that he was sent there, to save face for WWE. And if you look at Jim Ross, he has this great heart. I believe that if he wanted to be there, he would have been there. But I can't blame her for feeling that way. It's her sister and her nephew. Yeah, I know I'm not about to be able to finish this whole hit. David believed that Nancy's family wanted nothing to do with him because, again, Nancy only had one son and he died. He passed away. So David had no contact with Sandra or her side of the family, and they never even met or came in contact again until recently, a couple years ago, where Chris Jericho brought them together at an AEW house show, which is, AEW is a company that began to, be in competition with WWE, so it had nothing to do with WWE. After this, and the reason why this is so important, other than the fact that a person who was so great at his profession passed away, it literally changed the wrestling business. I personally believe that the wrestling business has not recovered from this. After this, about a year later, WWE went PG, and they stopped the blading. Blading is when a wrestler would cut themselves, and they bleed. That's how it starts. They stopped chair shots to the head, in which Chris Benoit was such a he loved them for some reason. If you're a Bengals fan, Joe Burrow, he doesn't mind being hit. He doesn't mind none of that. He loves the physical aspect of the game. You often hear about football players loving the physical aspect of the game. Well, Chris Benoit loved the physical aspect of being a wrestler. He loved the chair shots to the head. His finishing move was a diving headbutt. There is a video of him diving off I forgot how tall their ladders are, but he dove off a ladder to a headbutt. They said that his brain was damaged so badly, it was equivalent to an 85-year-old with Alzheimer's. and he was just a 40-year-old man, double his age with Alzheimer's. So I believe they got a lot more stricter in their drug testing. Like for instance, a couple years ago, one of their top superstars, Roman Reigns, suspended 30 days just because his paperwork was wrong. So it's like drugs is a super no-no now. They would like to believe that steroids was a super reason this happened. They say that he was in a roid rage when it happened. I believe steroids were found in his body, but not enough to do that. So I believe it was everything that had to do with the wrestling business. The fact that he was emotionally traumatized. His brain was traumatized. He didn't know how to deal with a lot. And I believe all the worst parts about the WWE and the wrestling business as a whole broke that man that night or that weekend, and it was over. And actually, I believe it was a video, like a interview similar to what he was doing for Eddie as a tribute. And I might be totally wrong on this, and I apologize if it is, but it's like a super wrestling promo where he's like, my family won't be watching Monday Night Raw because I'm gonna do the unthinkable. And yeah, he kind of did. Yeah, the aftermath, this is like the biggest thing. This was worse than the steroid scandal in which they got. And if you want me to cover that, I will. If you would like me to cover that, I will. This was bigger than the steroid scandal. This was bigger than Hulk Hogan being called out for saying the N-word. It was bigger than his sex tape. It was bigger than the Owen Hart tragedy. Again, if you want me to cover it, I'm down to cover all of this. But this was probably the biggest story that you're going to hear about wrestling because, again, it hasn't recovered since. Even AEW, the competition to WWE, one of the president, Cody Rhodes, son of Dusty Rhodes, took a chair shot to the head, and the fans were like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, we don't want to see that in 2020. We don't want to see that in 2019. It's no, don't do that. They never recovered from it, and they go so safe now that no finisher moves. There's this finisher that I like when I play video games, I assign this as my finisher, and it's rarely used now. It's called a brain buster, where you have someone up like a suplex, if you ever seen a suplex, where they just drop you on your head. You can't do that no more. Power drivers aren't allowed, but I believe that's more of a neck issue thing, but they aren't necessarily allowed anymore. Concussions are taken so seriously now because obviously with the brain damage that Chris Benoit suffered from, he dealt with a lot of concussions. A person similar to him, Daniel Bryan, who was just as great as him in the ring, who recently returned from retirement due to concussions, he left WWE for AEW because WWE was so protective of him. And I believe that it was due to the Chris Benoit tragedy. And that it's sad. It's sad that the very thing that kept him alive maybe, took him away from us, and he took his family. And my personal belief is that WWE did what they could as in the aftermath of keeping this man away from, I don't believe a lot of kids know who the hell Chris Benoit is. I don't believe if you were born after 2011, let's say, you know who Chris Benoit is. I personally just barely know him because I don't remember how great he was, but I remember those early days of the Ruthless Aggression era, the 2005, the video games. The video games helped me know who he was because I was heavy in playing video games at that time. I don't believe these kids know who he is, and that's a credit to WWE because he was a main figure of sorts at that time in his prime. So I believe it should stay that way. And unfortunately for his son, who looks dead on him, he has to suffer from his father's mistakes. Now, if he got the chance to wrestle, I don't believe they should ignore it anymore. It's like a slippery slope. I don't believe they should ignore it. I don't believe that they should ignore his father's past. I think it would also be beautiful to accept the ugly parts of the old wrestling, like the things that, like, a lot of wrestlers, like the greatest, one of the greatest trash talkers of all time, Rowdy Piper, said that he would not make it past 60, I believe, and he was right, because the wrestling company pays you enough to whereas you have to keep coming back, and it takes so much wear and tear. You traveling 300 nights a year, you're working 300 nights a year. They don't have life insurance, they don't have health insurance from WWE, and it's sick. And Vince McMahon and, you know, the McMahon family all profits off these people who are literally, they may never recover from this. The damage that they're doing from their bodies, they either go to Hollywood or they come back to WWE, and it's sick. And, you know, Chris Benoit, this tragedy, Chris Benoit family, they got the brunt of it. They got the worst of it. Yeah, that is the video. Got a lot of editing to do on this. This was my first time. Leave me any advice that you can, any feedback. I didn't get to finish the hair. I think I'm gonna just come back and show a finished product of the hair. Maybe, I don't know. But as you can see, there's just very small braids. I didn't part them. I haven't had a haircut in like a month, going on a month or two. So if this is successful, I can't wait to do it with a haircut. I'm looking to grow my hair like super longer than it is. I've been growing my hair for like 2 years, and it's like not that long. I don't know. Maybe I know I was using the wrong shampoo for a while, and the wrong hair products. So if you have any suggestions on how you should pick your hair, wash it, dry it off, anything, leave it in the comments, because I know I'm not doing something right. I know I'm not taking the best of care with my hair. So, and I want this like to be, I want to compare this to like my first video, to like a video like a year down the line, and my hair is like super healthy, all this and that. And you know, it's gonna be the before and after, but I'm gonna need the help of any suggestions or anything, because I'm just freestyling at this point. And the products that I use, I will actually leave in the comments that maybe you can look at them and see like, yeah, don't use that, or, you know, just really like suggest that brand more, or if I should just use it more. I appreciate you. If you watch this whole thing, I really fuck with you, because this is gonna be some editing, and this is gonna be, you know, this is really awkward just talking to myself for a long time. But you keep doing your thing. I hope that this got you through some, I hope this is helping you get through your day. Make somebody smile today, as I hope this video did for you. Share it, like, subscribe, all that. Be you. Thank you for being you. Smile. Make somebody smile today.